Andy, we had a conversation last week. I was getting a few queries about sex and intimacy in some of the Sustain and Healthy Relationship workshops. And what I've seen is kind of coming through from some of the women in the programme is after maybe childbirth, their sex drives have changed, but their partners, husbands or partners, has not really. And the best way they described it was they get the ick. They get the ick from him when he comes with a kind of like a raging hard on, and she's like, I'm up to my eyes with babies and all these things going on. So is there any advice that you could provide for both couples, I'm not saying that's one person or the other, around even conversations that they can have, or how they can kind of meet somewhere in the middle, because their sex lives have clearly changed?
I think it's natural. It's a very common thing for when a baby's born, when there are more than one child. There's a lot going on in a household, and the concentration is towards looking after children. So the couple relationship, whatever freedoms that might have had before, it kind of gets covered over, maybe with one child, and then you have another child, so there's another child, and there's a lot of work. And depending on how the childcare duties are within the relationship, that can impact. There's also expectation. Sex for one person might be about fun and about bonding and all of that, and for the other person it might well be something else on the list that they have to do. So who is sex for? And what's sex for? And what is sex? Is it just all about intercourse? Of course, if he has a raging hard on, so what? Sometimes what happens is that people are looking for attention, affection, and what's happening is that when you have a hug, and it's a full body hug, he might get an erection, which is an involuntary thing, but that doesn't mean that it has to be used, right? It's just a hug. And that's where things start to change, because in this case we're talking about she and he. He has a hard on, she just wants a hug, but she feels that, well, I can't go any further, so she stays away. That makes sense? Yeah. And the more she stays away, the more he's thinking, well, hang on a minute here, I want a hug. So the more hard on he gets, so the more she stays away. So there's some kind of negotiation where people have to say, hang on, this is just a hug. And if she's in, baby bath time and he's got a raging hard on, well, really it's not appropriate. He can have his hard on, but they have to negotiate something, a new space, so that it's not just kind of like, hand creeping across the bed when one person wants to sleep and the other person wants something else. So it's about, how do you talk about that?
Yeah.
Most people don't talk about it.
No, they don't, because what I'm hearing in classrooms as well is that women are feeling guilty.
Yeah.
So if he has a hard on, she's feeling guilty that she is unwilling or unable to fulfill those needs that she sees presented in front of her. He's not saying, I just want a hug, because physiologically, his body's saying that he's looking something else.
But he has hands.
Yeah.
So
you're encouraging masturbation?
Well, people can choose to express themselves sexually by themselves, with themselves. So it's, from where I sit as a psychosexual therapist, I'm not advocating that it's the other person's responsibility to fulfill someone else's sexual needs, their partner's sexual needs. So both people have responsibility in order to make the intimate space happen. So it's about our yearning to be touched as well as emotional connection. So yes, his body might be wanting something more and hers wants something less, but there's always something in the middle. And there's always negotiation, as in setting that, how do we set our couple time aside so that we both get a little bit of what we want?
Yeah.
Most people, the reality is most people leave their sexual interaction to when they go to bed and their body wants to go to sleep. Their brain is putting them to sleep. So if your normal sleep time is, 11 o'clock, You're going to go to bed at 5 to 11 and you want to have sex, and your brain's going, I want to wake up tomorrow morning and have to go to work, and I've got kids, I've got work, I've got whatever else to do. And you know, some people can manage that. But a lot of people, if you want to have sex when you go to bed earlier. You know.
But again, it's not by taking that time out to discuss that and negotiate that.
Okay.
So I think the question around there is, you know, how do you create that more equal relationship when a woman has an orgasm later than a man?
I think that to me sounds like expectation. Women's physiology is a little different to guys. You know, in terms of arousal and you know, the whole, from arousal all the way through to orgasm and resolution, it's the same for men and women, but men's timing is different to women's timing. You know, equality, what is equality sexually, except if both people get what they want? If both people are getting from the encounter overall what they both want, then I suppose I'm wondering, does it matter who takes longer? You know, the physiology is different. You know, women have wombs, men don't.
I think
biologically speaking.
Yeah, well, I think some of the questions are influenced. I'd be interested to ask it anyway. What do you think?
Sorry, can I just put something else in with that one? I think it's about working out for yourself. What do I want from this sexual relationship? What do I want from a sexual relationship overall? Is sex always about orgasm? Is it always about intercourse? Is it just simply about us getting together and feeling close? So what is it? You know?
I would like to ask you about the influence of pornography on people's sex lives.
Okay.
So I also run a relationship and sexuality education program. I know from research that young boys are looking at pornography from when they're about 10 years old. That changes expectations of what sex is or what sex can look like. So what, in your experience, or what has, I suppose, presented in your therapy room, the issues around pornography and sex and intimacy for couples?
A lot of the time, so how the pornography seems to impact is with erectile dysfunction. One of the primary reasons for erectile dysfunction that show up in my counselling room is the use of too much pornography. So the stimulus, then no human, no kind of real woman, if you like, or even real guy can compete with that, because people forget there's cut and editing. You know, so what seems like he's lasted for an hour and a half is probably over a period of days. It's not realistic, but if that's your stimulation and if you're masturbating to that and you edge, then that becomes difficult to replicate with a real life partner.
What do you mean by edge, Anandi?
So it's when you masturbate and you bring yourself just up to the cusp of where you're going to climax, and then you bring it back down again so you don't climax. So the idea is not to climax.
Okay.
You know, now edging is fine, but if that's all you're doing, then it becomes more difficult. Yeah.
And the more you watch pornography, the more stimulation that you need to be able to masturbate or to have an orgasm as well. Yes. And that's why erectile dysfunction shown up.
Yes. Also, it then becomes difficult to use your own fantasy. You need the external one all the time. Now, women watch pornography as well, and an increasing number of young girls are watching pornography. And what that's doing is it's changing people's expectations of what sex actually is, and also what consent is. So things like pulling hair, slapping, spitting, those things start to become, strangulation starts to become kind of, well, this is what you do.
Normalized.
And you don't need to ask permission for those things then. The converse of that is that if that's not what you're doing, then you think, well, I'm not doing it the right way. And if your partner doesn't want to do that, then what does that say about your partner? You know, so if you're a young girl and you're watching porn and that's what you see in the porn, and your partner doesn't want to do that, then you think, well, maybe he doesn't love you now.
And vice versa.
And vice versa, yeah.
Okay. A question from someone who is very much in love with their fiance, but they would like to know the reasons why, or how interest in intimacy seems to wane as people age.
Ooh. Right. Well, it could be hormonal, could be blood flow. Menopause plays a real big part in women's sexual desire. Could be just simply the approach is no longer adequate. It could be that what you liked when you were 30 is not what you like when you were 40. So illness changes things, responsibility changes things, lots of things affect desire for both men and women. So again, it's about conversation. And the other thing is people just knowing their own bodies, how their own bodies respond. What do I need now? And postmenopausal, what do I need now?
And I think the question around intimacy is really interesting, because the first conversation we had, you said to me, well, what does sex look like for you without the intercourse?
Yeah.
Talk me through that a wee bit.
Yeah, culturally, I think we think of sex as intercourse. So sex equal intercourse. For me, when I think of sex, it's this big umbrella with lots of activity underneath it: hugging, kissing, necking, intercourse, one of those. Heavy petting, masturbation, oral sex. So it kind of, it's whatever under that big umbrella called sex. So it doesn't have to mean that it's just one directional. And if you pull the whole thing all the way back to what its basic need is, which is in closeness, then it's not goal-centric after that. That's the goal, to be close. How are you going to be close? You've got a whole range of options there, so it doesn't have to be one thing. If you haven't got the energy to have a half an hour session or an all-nighter or whatever it is, well, what's wrong with just having a cuddle? There, so it doesn't have to be one thing. If you haven't got the energy to have a half an hour session or an all-nighter or whatever it is, well, what's wrong with just having a cuddle? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I'm interested as well in some of the women that have been in our workshops and their ability not to talk about sex. So can you talk a wee bit about this stigma around talking about sex? I think sometimes in this society people are more ready to have sex, physical sex, than actually have a conversation about what it is that they want, what they need, what they desire, what their fantasies are, articulating that sex thing, that the umbrella that you're talking about.
Sex, money and domestics are the three things couples don't really talk about that much. I think part of it is that we expect the other person to know, but most people don't know how their own bodies really operate. What do they want, what they like. They get told what they should like, or they see what they should like from pornography. But the whole thing around the not talking about it, part of it I think is embarrassment. Part of it is that you don't want to maybe offend your partner. Part of it is that you don't want to be offended yourself. I mean, supposing your partner says, well, that thing you've been doing, I don't really like it that much. And you go, why'd you tell me for years? And you say, well, I didn't, thought you might change. I thought I might like it eventually. I mean, we had sometimes the clients will say, well, if I don't say anything because, I'll tell you if I don't like it. But people want affirmation, So affirmation, yes, and the affirmation is much better, So if you affirm something more than you don't affirm something, then they might get the message that, well, you didn't go too much in this direction. But more than that, it's just about saying, you know,
Yeah.
I like it when you touch me this way. Yeah.
And for me, that's the big crux. That's where the embarrassment lies for
Yeah.
people to be able to talk about it.
Because it makes them feel vulnerable. Yeah.
But surely sex and intimacy is about, there has to be a level of vulnerability.
There is, but we don't like thinking about it like that.
And all the main sustaining healthy relationships workshops I'm doing, it doesn't matter if it's a romantic relationship with your child. I always say, you know, we like to think the people that we know and love are telepathic, but they're not. You know, we need to be able to communicate and articulate what it is that we want, how we feel, and to improve communication, because good communication obviously improves.
The thing is, we're communicating all the time, I think. It's just how we communicate. Even when we're not saying anything, we're communicating. But we're delivering a particular message. It's just that the other side isn't receiving the message we're delivering. So it's, you know, it's not.
Okay, so another question was, do men really care if women's bodies aren't perfect? So we have to clarify what not perfect meant. And by perfect, I mean no scars, no belly fat from childbirth.
So, I guess, yeah, they don't care. If it's a well-established relationship, yeah, most guys just don't care. They just want affection. Women care more about their bodies than the guys who just want to kind of see them naked. Yeah.
And that's obviously what we're fed through society as well.
And I mean, but flip it around the other way. Men put on weight too.
Yeah.
They may not put on baby weight, but they do put on weight. And their women most of the time don't care about it. No, some guys will care about it. They no longer find their plumper partner attractive. Just as in the same way some women no longer find their bare belly partner attractive.
But attraction has to run deeper than that.
Well,
because that's the physicality of
that's the physicality of it.
attraction.
So sexual attraction, at least in the initial stages of a relationship, is pretty much about whose bones do you want to jump, you know? And that's a physical thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and a chemical thing, surely as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
What makes your juices flow?
So Anandi, one question we did receive was, when a lady squirts, I understand that the liquid expelled is mostly watered down urine and a little lubricant from the skin's glands. I'd be fascinated to learn what percentage is urine and the biology behind how the water gets there.
Well, this particular thing is fairly debatable, right? So there isn't a kind of consensus across the board that it happens. I think there is some kind of some sort of foot in the door that says, yes, it happens, we don't know why it happens and who it happens to. So let's go with that, yes, it's a reality, but it's not a reality for most people, most women. And also, any of the stuff that I've read about it seems to be what the person who asked the question is saying. It's a mixture of urine, water, and lubricant. What percentage now? Who knows? Why? Because there isn't a whole lot of research done about it. Because you can't predict who's going to squirt and who isn't going to squirt. So how do you capture this potential?
Squirt.
How do you capture the squirt?
And then analyse what percentage is
Because the other thing is, it's not an ejaculate the way a male ejaculate is, which can be captured in something. I mean, if you think about women's anatomy, it is, and I'm talking about biological women's anatomy here. You know, it's very moist, that whole area. You know, so how do you capture that how do you separate just that particular liquid out? Don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, thank you for doing your best to answer that. So this is our sex guru Anandi. If this goes well and people have enjoyed your answers. I'm sure we can they can post more questions in and we can do it.